Today we continue the story of Jesus' life in the Gospel of Matthew. Last week we finished up his third sermon that he gives in the Gospel of Matthew, the parabolic discourse, which means there are lots of parables. And when he finished giving that discourse, it says then that he went to Nazareth where they rejected him. Because they rejected him, he couldn't do many deeds of power. So here now, the entire 14th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew. So when Herod, the ruler, heard the reports of Jesus, he said to his servants, "This is John the Baptist. He's been raised from the dead, and that's the reason why this power is at work in him." For Herod had arrested John and bound him and put him in prison on account of Herodias. Now Herodias was Herod's brother Philip's wife. For John the Baptist kept telling him, "It is not lawful for you to take your brother's wife." So Herod wanted to kill John, but he was afraid of the crowds. The crowds considered John a prophet. But on Herod's birthday, the daughter of Herodias danced for the company and pleased Herod so much that he made an oath to grant her whatever she might ask for. So prompted by her mother Herodias, the girl said, "Give me the head of John the Baptist here on a platter." Now this grieved Herod, but on account of his oath and his guests, he commanded it be given to her. So he sent down and had John beheaded in prison. And they brought the head on a platter and gave it to the girl. And the girl brought it to her mother. Then John's disciples came, took the body, buried it, and then they went and told Jesus. Now when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there by boat and went to a deserted place by himself. But when the crowd heard it, they followed on foot, so that when Jesus came to the shore, he saw this great crowd. He had compassion on them, and he healed their sick. When evening came, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is late. Send the crowd away so they might go to the villages and buy food for themselves." And Jesus said, "There's no need. You give them something to eat." And they said, "We don't have anything but 5 loaves and 2 fish." And Jesus said, "Bring them to me." And so he made the whole crowd sit on the grass. Then he looked up at heaven, blessed and broke the bread, and gave them the pieces to the disciples. And the disciples gave them to the crowd. And all of them ate and were full. When they gathered up the leftover broken pieces, there were 12 basketfuls. Now, of those who ate, there were about 5,000 men, besides the women and children. Then Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. So after he dismissed the crowd, then he went up on the mountain to pray. When it was dark, Jesus was there alone. But by this time, the boat, battered by the waves, was far away from shore because the wind was against them. So early in the morning, Jesus came came walking toward them on the sea. And when they saw Jesus walking on the water toward them, they were terrified because they said, "It's a ghost." But immediately Jesus says, "Take heart. It is I. Do not be afraid." Then Peter said, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And Jesus said, "Come." So Peter stepped out of the boat and started walking on water and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened. And beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." And immediately Jesus caught his hand and brought him to him, saying, "You have little faith. Why did you doubt?" And when they got to the boat, the wind ceased. And all those on the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." Here's the gospel for today. One of the things that we profess as Christians is that Jesus is fully divine and fully human. And Jesus' divinity is really on display in today's gospel. These are a couple of more dramatic examples of Jesus' divine power. I mean, the first one, it's funny. We just take for granted that he's going to heal the sick, which is no small thing. But then he takes 5 loaves and 2 fish and multiplies them so it feeds 5,000 plus. We always talk about the feeding of the 5,000. That was just the men. So who knows, maybe 8,000 people that he fed with 5 loaves and 2 fish. And then right after that, the miracle of walking on water. Jesus was divine. Jesus could do things that normal humans couldn't do. But in addition to believing that Jesus is fully divine, fully God, we also believe that Jesus is fully human. And to be fully human means he has a human body. Well, I mean, what does that mean? I think it also believes he has, in some form, the same limitations and the same challenges we have as humans. And as I mentioned kind of before the telling, Jesus is coming out teaching parables, but right after that, he goes to his hometown and gets rejected. Of course, some of the other Gospels, when they talk about this, say they brought him to a cliff and were ready to throw him off. But imagine going to those that you grew up with, your friends, neighbors, folks that you knew, and having them reject you. That's no small thing. So Jesus is rejected. Then right after that, at least in the gospel, right after that, he gets word that John is killed in a very gruesome way. According to the Gospel of Luke, John the Baptist was Jesus' cousin. And so Jesus hears that his cousin has been killed. But John the Baptist was also a fellow prophet, someone who was out to proclaiming that the kingdom of heaven has come near, repent and believe. And so a cousin, a fellow prophet, dies. And Jesus, it hits Jesus. It says immediately when he heard this, he withdrew. Whatever he was doing in that place, he knew that he needed to get away. He needed to go back and get clear on who he was, what he was up to, because if they can kill John the Baptist, could they also kill him? And would they also kill him? And you're saying, but he knew. It's like, yeah, this is kind of the tension between how human was Jesus and how divine was Jesus, and what does that mean? But certainly, at the very least, it impacted Jesus. So they felt a need to get away. And what happens? he gets interrupted. He's trying to get away. He goes to a deserted place, and the people follow him. So even stronger than his need to recharge his batteries, to connect to his source, to spend some time grieving, was his compassionate heart. He saw the people. He saw the sick that they were bringing. And he couldn't just walk away. He still had to do what he could to bring healing and life to those people. And then, not only does he do that, but then when the disciples very pragmatically and logically and appropriately say, these people need to eat. We don't have enough to feed them. You better send them away. What Jesus does is he generates generosity. He takes the disciples nothing. He said, we have nothing but 5 loaves and 2 fish. And he challenges them to be generous. A lot of biblical scholars have talked about the multiplication of the loaves as being a miracle of generosity. In the sense that when folks back then, they knew there weren't fast food places around. You couldn't call Instacart or something like that and have food delivered. And so they speculate that actually a lot of people brought food with them and just had it under their clothes to make sure they would have enough. So then the miracle is that when the disciples offer what they have to feed, that same generous spirit creates more generosity. And all of a sudden the food that people had for themselves, they were freed up to give to others. And so then in generating generosity, 5,000 plus people are fed. And then finally, Jesus sends the disciples away, dismisses the crowd, and he gets to finally go spend time for himself. And as I've thought about what is it like for Jesus to pray, what kept occurring to me is that Jesus knew he needed to get connected to his source. We believe that Jesus is part of the Trinity, so you might think about it. Jesus needed to get connected to the Spirit with God and the other members of the Trinity. Needed to be reminded, needed to experience that all was going to be well. That the path he was on, the calling that he had, the mission that he had undertook was going to be worth it, and that it would be okay, and that he could continue on. Julian of Norwich, who lived several hundred years ago, had a prayer that went, all shall be well, all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. I think Jesus had to go to that mountain, spend some time in prayer, and get connected to the source until he could hear it within his heart that all shall be well, all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. In essence, he needed to hear the divine say, take heart, be courageous. It is I. Do not be afraid. So from there, when Jesus was walking on the water, and he came to the boat, the first thing out of his mouth were those words that he had gotten reconnected with. Take heart. It is I. Do not be afraid. And to his credit, that Peter steps out of the boat. And he does fine as long as he keeps his eyes on Jesus, trusts in Jesus, allows Jesus to be his source as opposed to the storm and everything and raging around in the wind. As soon as you let that stuff in, then it starts eating away. But Jesus was there and saying, "Your little faith, why did you doubt?" And Jesus knows why he doubts. Jesus had just gone through the being rejected and the loss of a relative and a partner in the ministry. He actually knows. But the prayer was that Peter might remember and work and develop that trusting muscle, that faith muscle. So the next time he steps out of the boat, he won't doubt. Jesus had to get connected with Jesus' source. He had to allow God's Spirit to refill him, to remind him, to focus him, to give him the heart that was able to heal and inspire people's generosity, to walk on water and to create faith in people. That source that Jesus had is the same source available to us. The storms of life do come and hit us. They can overwhelm us. And the noise of the wind, the noise of the fury, the instability of the ocean and the waves and life around us, it can't help but want to make us be afraid. If we go to our source, we can also hear, "All shall be well, all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well." So just as Jesus was able to bring healing to those people, to create generosity, to be people to take a step out in faith, so we also, if we allow ourselves to be sourced and listen to Jesus' commands and do what Jesus tells us and to step out in faith, we also become people who can bring healing, people who can create generosity, people who can bring peace and courage into places where everyone is just scared and anxious and afraid. And in so doing, we can be part of creating God's kingdom here on earth and bringing that to